I never thought my own mother would try to steal my business. The company I built from nothing, working 80-hour weeks while she told me I was wasting my time. The same business she now believed my half-brother deserved to control, despite him never working a day in his life. When they showed up with legal papers demanding I sign over 51% ownership, I knew I had to make the hardest decision of my life. What followed revealed a truth so shocking, it changed everything. Before I dive into this wild story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If my journey of standing up against family betrayal resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of survivors. Trust me, the ending of this story will leave you speechless. My name is Audrey, and at 30 years old, I've built a tech consulting business valued at $2.5 million. But success didn't come easy, nor did it come with family support. In fact, my journey began with a childhood marked by emotional neglect and constant comparison. My mother Pamela remarried when I was 14, bringing Raymond and his traditional values into our home. From day one, the dynamic shifted. While I had once been the center of my mother's world, her attention quickly diverted to building the perfect family with Raymond. They had my half-brother Connor 2 years into their marriage, and from that moment on, I became an afterthought. Connor needs more attention. He's just a baby, my mother would say when I asked for help with school projects. As the years passed, that excuse evolved. Connor needs these expensive soccer lessons, or Connor deserves this vacation. Meanwhile, I worked part-time jobs throughout high school just to afford college application fees. When I announced my plan to major in computer science, my mother rolled her eyes. "Such a waste of your time. Computers are for men," she said dismissively. Raymond nodded in agreement while Connor, then just 8 years old, was praised for simply knowing how to turn on a tablet. College was a struggle financially. My scholarship covered tuition, but I worked 3 jobs to pay for housing and food. My roommate Lauren would often find me asleep at my desk, exhausted from balancing work and studies. Meanwhile, my social media feed showed my mother and Raymond proudly announcing their plan to fully fund Connor's education at any school he chose. After graduation, while my classmates took jobs at established firms, I had a different vision. I'd identified a gap in the market for specialized tech consulting for small businesses that couldn't afford enterprise-level services. My professors thought I was crazy. Get experience first, they advised. But I knew my idea had potential. I started my company in my tiny studio apartment, using a secondhand laptop and working from my kitchen counter. For the first year, I continued bartending on weekends to make rent while building my client base during the week. Each small success was met with indifference from my family. "When are you going to get a real job?" my mother would ask during our increasingly rare phone calls. "Connor's thinking about pre-med. Now, that's a respectable career." The irony came 3 years later, when my business began to truly flourish. Suddenly, my mother started mentioning me to her friends. "My daughter, the entrepreneur," she'd say, as if she'd supported me all along. Raymond began asking pointed questions about my revenue and client contracts during holiday dinners. I answered vaguely, uncomfortable with their newfound interest in my finances. Then Connor dropped out of college after his freshman year. "School isn't for everyone," my mother said defensively, the same woman who had criticized my every academic choice. The double standard was glaring but not surprising. As my company grew to a team of 15 and moved into proper office space, the family dynamics shifted again. My mother started calling more frequently, often mentioning financial struggles or unexpected bills. At first, I helped out of a desire for her approval that I'd never outgrown. "A few thousand for car repairs here, covering Connor's apartment security, deposit there." But the requests increased in both frequency and amount. And then Victor entered the picture, my mother's new boyfriend after her divorce from Raymond. Tall, charming, and always dressed in expensive suits that seemed just slightly beyond what a regional sales manager should afford, Victor took an immediate interest in me. Not personally, but professionally. "So tell me about this little business of yours," he asked within minutes of our first meeting, his eyes calculating something behind his smile. I've always had a knack for spotting potential. I didn't think much of it then. But looking back, that was when everything began to change. The casual questions about my company structure, the impromptu suggestions about family businesses, and the way he encouraged Connor to learn from his successful sister. All of it was setting the stage for what was to come. If only I'd recognized the red flags sooner. The shift in my family's attitude toward me was gradual but unmistakable. What began as occasional requests for financial help evolved into something more persistent and entitled. My mother's calls now always included some mention of money. Her car needed repairs, the roof was leaking, or Victor's temporary business setback required a short-term loan. Just until next month, she'd promise. But next month would come and go with no mention of repayment, only a new crisis requiring my assistance. When I gently brought up the previous loan, she'd look hurt. "I didn't realize you were keeping score, Audrey. That's not what family does." Victor became a constant presence in these conversations, often taking the phone from my mother to explain in business-like terms why this latest request was both urgent and sound. "Think of it as investing in your family," he'd say with that smooth confidence that made me increasingly uneasy. Then came the suggestion that caught me off guard. During a Sunday dinner at their house, Victor casually mentioned that Connor was between opportunities and needed direction. "Your brother has such potential," Victor said, swirling his wine. "He just needs the right mentor." Connor, now 22, looked up from his phone with sudden interest. My mother beamed at me expectantly. "Have you ever thought about bringing him into your business?" Victor continued. "Family companies have certain advantages, tax-wise." I nearly choked on my water. Connor had never expressed the slightest interest in technology or business. His brief college career had included 3 major changes before he dropped out, citing the restrictive academic environment. "I don't know," I said carefully. "The tech field requires specific skills and education." "You could teach him," my mother interrupted. "That's what big sisters do." Looking at Connor's suddenly hopeful expression, I felt cornered. After years of seeking my family's approval, here they were finally seeing value in what I'd built, but only as an opportunity for Connor. Against my better judgment, I agreed to let Connor shadow me for a few weeks, just to see if it's a good fit. I qualified. From day one, it was a disaster. Connor arrived at the office an hour late, dressed as if for a nightclub rather than a professional environment. He spent meetings texting, asked inappropriate personal questions to my female employees, and showed zero interest in learning the basics I tried to teach him. Lauren, now my operations manager and closest friend, pulled me aside after Connor's first week. "This isn't working, Audrey. The team is uncomfortable, and he's disrupting our workflow." I knew she was right, but the thought of disappointing my mother again made my stomach knot. "Just a few more days," I promised. That Friday, I overheard Connor talking to a client on the phone. "Yeah, I'll probably be running this place soon. My sister's just keeping the seat warm," he laughed. I stood frozen in the hallway, unable to believe what I was hearing. When I confronted him later, he shrugged it off. "Just joking around. Victor says I need to project confidence in the business world." The mention of Victor sent a chill through me. What exactly was he telling Connor? That question was answered the following week at another family dinner. After my mother served dessert, Victor cleared his throat. "Connor has been telling us about his experience at your company, Audrey." Connor nodded eagerly. "I've been learning a lot." "We think it's time to formalize his position," Victor continued. "A real title, equity stake, that sort of thing." I set down my fork, stunned. He's been shadowing me for less than 2 weeks. He has no experience or qualifications. "But he has potential," my mother interjected. "And he's family." "My business isn't a family charity," I said, struggling to keep my voice even. "It supports 15 employees and their families. I can't just hand out executive positions." Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "No one's suggesting charity. We're talking about making room for family in your success. Success that, frankly, you seem reluctant to share." The accusation stung. I'd been sharing my success, thousands of dollars in loans that we all knew would never be repaid. After dinner, my mother followed me to my car. "Connor needs this opportunity, Audrey. His father never provided for his future like he should have. And that's somehow my responsibility? I asked. We're family, she said, as if that explained everything. You need to make room for your brother. After everything we've done for you. I drove home in a daze, trying to recall exactly what they had done for me. The memories that came were of missed school events, dismissive comments about my career choice, and years of emotional neglect while Connor received every advantage. For the first time, I began to question whether maintaining this relationship was worth the cost to my mental health and business. But I wasn't prepared for how quickly things would escalate from uncomfortable to threatening. 3 days after the tense family dinner, my receptionist Melissa called my office line. Audrey, your mother is here with 2 men. They don't have an appointment, but they're insisting on seeing you immediately. I glanced at my calendar, packed with client meetings and team check-ins. Tell them I'm booked solid today. I can meet tomorrow afternoon. 5 minutes later, my office door burst open. Victor strode in confidently, followed by my mother and Connor. Victor carried a leather portfolio under his arm with an air of self-importance that made my skin crawl. This couldn't wait, Victor said, closing the door behind them while ignoring my shocked expression. Family business is priority business. I stood up, already feeling the defensive walls rising. I'm in the middle of preparing for a client presentation. We need to reschedule. This won't take long, Victor replied, opening his portfolio and spreading several official-looking documents across my desk. We've taken the liberty of drafting the necessary paperwork. I looked down at the papers, my confusion turning to disbelief as I scanned the text. The document was titled Family Business Restructuring Agreement and outlined a new ownership structure for my company, with Connor receiving 51% controlling interest. What is this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Victor smiled, placing a gold pen on top of the papers. The future of your family business. Connor will assume the role of CEO, with you transitioning to Chief Technology Officer. Your expertise with a technical side, his fresh vision for growth. It's the perfect partnership. I looked at Connor, who was examining his reflection in my office window rather than meeting my eyes. Then to my mother, whose expression held an unsettling mixture of determination and avoidance. This is insane, I said, pushing the papers away. This company is 100% mine. I built it from nothing. Connor has no experience, no education in this field, and has shown zero aptitude during his time here. He's family, my mother finally spoke. And family takes care of each other. By stealing my company? I asked incredulously. Victor's smile hardened. No one's stealing anything. We're restructuring to benefit everyone. Connor needs a future, and frankly, Audrey, you could use the help. The work-life balance of a solo entrepreneur isn't sustainable. I laughed without humor. So, this is for my benefit? Taking my company away is helping me? You're being dramatic, my mother sighed. No one's taking anything away. You'll still be involved. As a minority shareholder in my own company, I was nearly shouting now, aware that my glass-walled office made this humiliating scene visible to my employees. Victor leaned forward, his voice dropping to a menacing tone. I've been doing some research into your early contracts, Audrey. There are some irregularities that could cause problems if they came to light. Tax authorities tend to ask uncomfortable questions. My blood ran cold. He was threatening me. There were no irregularities. I'd been meticulous from day one, working with reputable accountants and attorneys to ensure everything was above board. But the threat itself was enough to reveal his true character. You don't know what you're talking about, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Maybe not, Victor shrugged. But allegations alone can damage a reputation. Clients get nervous, start looking elsewhere. These things have a way of spiraling. My mother placed her hand on mine. Honey, we're just trying to secure Connor's future. You've done so well for yourself. It's time to help your brother now. I pulled my hand away. By giving him what I've spent years building? What about his responsibility to build something for himself, like I did? Not everyone is like you, she said dismissively. Connor needs this opportunity. I'm ready to take over. Connor finally spoke, straightening his posture in a poor imitation of confidence. "I've got big ideas for the company. You don't even know what we do," I replied flatly. "Computers and stuff," he waved vaguely. "The point is, I know how to delegate." Through the glass walls, I could see Lauren watching with concern, other employees whispering among themselves. This public spectacle was damaging regardless of the outcome. "You have 48 hours to sign the papers," Victor announced, gathering the documents back into his portfolio, but leaving a copy on my desk. "After that, we'll need to explore other options to resolve this situation." As they turned to leave, my mother paused at the door. "This is the right thing, Audrey. You owe us." The words hit me like a physical blow. Owe them? After years of emotional neglect, undermining my choices, and only showing interest once my business became successful? When the door closed behind them, I sank into my chair, hands shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Through the glass, I saw my team pretending to work while stealing concerned glances my way. The humiliation burned almost as much as the betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. "You okay? Need backup?" I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I stared at the papers they'd left, the audacity of their demand still not fully registering. This wasn't just about money or business. This was about control, about rewriting the narrative of my life to make my achievements community property, while my struggles had been mine alone. For the first time, I saw my mother and her relationship with Connor with complete clarity. This wasn't love, it was something more dysfunctional, and I was done being the victim of it. Sleep eluded me that night. I paced my apartment, replaying the confrontation in my office, examining years of interactions with my mother through this new, painful lens. Had she always seen me as a resource rather than a daughter? The mounting evidence suggested yes. At 2 a.m., I called Margaret, my attorney. Despite the hour, she answered on the third ring. "This better be good, Audrey," she grumbled, sleep heavy in her voice. "My family is trying to take my company," I blurted out, then proceeded to explain the entire situation, from Connor's internship to Victor's thinly veiled threats. By the end of my explanation, Margaret was fully awake. "First, take a breath. These documents have absolutely no legal standing without your consent. Your company is registered solely in your name, with clear documentation of your ownership from day one. But Victor mentioned irregularities in my early contracts." "A fishing expedition," Margaret interrupted. "If there were actual issues, he would have specified them. He's bluffing, hoping you'll cave under vague threats." Her confidence steadied me. "So, what do I do?" "Document everything. If they've put threats in writing, save them. Forward me that paperwork they left. And tomorrow, we implement security measures at your office." By 8 a.m., I was at the office implementing Margaret's recommendations. I met with our IT director to change all system passwords and access protocols. Security codes for the building were reset. I instructed our receptionist that my mother, Victor, and Connor were not to be admitted under any circumstances. I then called an emergency staff meeting to address the elephant in the room. "Many of you witnessed an uncomfortable scene yesterday," I began, facing my concerned employees. "I want to be transparent about what's happening. My family is making inappropriate demands regarding the company. I've refused these demands, and as a result, there may be some turbulence ahead." Lauren spoke up. "We're behind you, Audrey. This company exists because of your vision and hard work." Nods and murmurs of agreement rippled through the room, bringing an unexpected lump to my throat. While my biological family was trying to undermine me, I realized I'd built a different kind of family here, one based on mutual respect and shared purpose. At precisely 10 a.m., as I predicted, they returned. From my office, I watched Melissa intercepting them at reception, her posture professional but firm as she informed them I was unavailable. Victor's face darkened. He pointed at my office, clearly visible through the glass walls, and demanded entrance. Melissa stood her ground as I'd instructed, pointing to the newly posted visitor policy requiring appointments. My phone rang, "Melissa. They're insisting on seeing you. Security is on standby." "I'll be right out," I replied, straightening my shoulders and taking a deep breath. In the reception area, Victor's charm had evaporated, revealing the calculating personality beneath. My mother looked between us anxiously, while Connor slouched against the wall, scrolling through his phone as if bored by the whole situation. Audrey, Victor began with forced pleasantness when he saw me. We're here to finalize our agreement. There is no agreement, I stated firmly. I've reviewed your proposal with my attorney. It has no legal merit, and I categorically reject it. Victor's facade cracked further. You're making a mistake. Family businesses thrive with proper leadership. This isn't a family business, I interrupted. It's my business, built without any support or contribution from any of you. My mother stepped forward. Audrey, be reasonable. What Connor needs isn't my responsibility, I said, finally voicing the truth I'd suppressed for years. I'm not sacrificing everything I've built because he doesn't want to build anything for himself. Connor looked up from his phone, suddenly interested. Hey, that's not fair. I have plans. Plans that involve taking what someone else created, I replied. That's not ambition, Connor. That's entitlement. Victor moved closer, lowering his voice to a threatening whisper. You don't want to make enemies of us, Audrey. I can destroy everything you've built. Something snapped inside me, the last thread of obligation that had kept me tethered to this toxic dynamic. Let me be perfectly clear, I said, loud enough for everyone in reception to hear. You are no longer welcome in this building or in my life. Any further attempts to contact me will be handled by my attorney. Any threats or defamatory statements will result in legal action. My mother's face crumpled. You can't cut off your family. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? I asked, years of suppressed hurt surfacing. Name one thing you've sacrificed for my benefit. Her silence was deafening. That's what I thought. I continued. Now please leave before I have security escort you out. Victor's expression twisted with rage. You'll regret this. No one walks away from me. I just did, I replied, turning my back on them and walking toward my office. Melissa, please call security to ensure our visitors find the exit. Once inside my office, the adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation began to fade, leaving me shaking. Lauren appeared with a cup of tea and closed the door behind her. That, she said with quiet admiration, was badass. I managed a weak smile. It doesn't feel badass. It feels terrible. Standing up for yourself against people who try to use you should feel good, she countered. But I get it. They're still your family. My phone began buzzing with texts and calls from my mother. I silenced it and placed it face down on my desk. Not anymore, I said quietly. Not like this. That evening, I returned to a voicemail inbox full of messages from my mother, each more tearful than the last. You're tearing this family apart, she sobbed in the final one. After everything I've sacrificed for you. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd been the one sacrificing my time, my money, my emotional well-being, trying to earn love that should have been freely given. No more. I drafted an email to Margaret outlining everything that had happened and forwarded the increasingly threatening texts from Victor. Then I did something I'd never allowed myself before. I turned off my phone, poured a glass of wine, and gave myself permission to grieve the family I'd wanted but never really had. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But for the first time in my adult life, I was facing them without the weight of toxic family expectations. The next morning, I awakened to the notification light blinking on my phone. When I finally worked up the courage to check, I found dozens of missed calls, texts, and voicemails. But what truly made my stomach drop was the Facebook notification. 15 people had tagged me in posts. Connor had taken to social media with a vengeance, posting a carefully edited version of events that painted me as a ruthless businesswoman who had betrayed family loyalty for corporate greed. My mother had shared his post, adding her own heartbroken commentary about how success changed my daughter into someone I don't recognize anymore. The posts had already gathered sympathetic comments from extended family members and mutual friends who knew nothing about the actual situation. Distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly condemning my selfishness. Former high school classmates were expressing disappointment in how I'd forgotten my roots. My hands shook as I scrolled through the mounting public attack. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was a calculated attempt to damage my reputation, both personally and professionally. I called Lauren. "Have you seen social media this morning?" "I was just about to call you," she replied grimly. "It's getting ugly. Victor's LinkedIn post about your company's financial troubles has already been viewed by several clients." My blood ran cold. What financial troubles? We're more profitable than ever. Exactly. It's complete fiction, but 3 clients have already called asking if their projects are secure. I took a deep breath, pushing down the panic rising in my chest. "I'm coming in. Call an emergency meeting with the leadership team for 9 a.m. By the time I reached the office, 2 more clients had called with concerns. The social media campaign had expanded, with Victor now suggesting that I had ethical issues in my business practices without specifying what those might be, a classic tactic to create suspicion without making actionable defamatory statements. The leadership team gathered in the conference room, faces tense with concern. "This is a coordinated attack," I began bluntly. "My family is retaliating because I refuse to hand over control of the company. They're spreading false information about our financial stability and my personal integrity." Jason, our finance director, shook his head. "The irony is we just had our best quarter ever. Which is why we need to address this head-on," I continued. "I've asked Margaret to join us to discuss legal options, but in the meantime, I want complete transparency with our clients and partners." We developed a crisis management plan. Personal calls to every client from their project manager, sharing our latest financial highlights and addressing concerns directly. A company-wide email clarifying the situation without delving into personal details. And most importantly, business as usual. The best refutation of false claims about instability was continued excellent performance. Margaret arrived as we were wrapping up. "I've reviewed everything," she said, setting her briefcase on the table. The social media posts and Victor's LinkedIn statements skirt the line of defamation, but they're carefully worded to avoid clear legal liability. "So there's nothing we can do?" I asked, disappointment evident in my voice. "I didn't say that," Margaret replied with a slight smile. "I've drafted cease and desist letters for all 3 of them. The letters outline potential legal consequences if they continue making false statements about you or the company." While the team implemented our response plan, I retreated to my office, the weight of the situation finally hitting me fully. My hands trembled as I tried to review client proposals. My chest felt tight, breathing becoming shallow and rapid. I recognized the symptoms, an anxiety attack, something I'd experienced during particularly stressful periods in building my business, but never with this intensity. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to take deep breaths, when my phone rang. It was Heather, my friend since college, and one of the few people who knew the full history with my family. "I just saw Connor's post," she said without preamble. "What a crock of manipulative garbage. Are you okay?" The simple question of genuine concern broke something in me. To my horror, I began sobbing, unable to form words through the release of tension. "I'm coming over," Heather stated rather than asked. "Cancel whatever you have this afternoon. You need perspective, wine, and someone who actually knows the truth." 2 hours later, we sat in my living room, takeout containers scattered across the coffee table. Heather had insisted I leave the office early, correctly assessing that I needed space to process. "You know this is classic narcissistic behavior, right?" Heather said, refilling our glasses. "They couldn't control you, so now they're trying to destroy your reputation." "It's working," I admitted. 2 clients have already postponed projects pending review of our partnership. "Temporarily," Heather emphasized. "The truth always emerges eventually. You need to take care of yourself through this storm." She was right, of course. I'd been so focused on the external threats that I'd neglected the personal toll this was taking. That night, I researched therapists specializing in family trauma and booked an appointment with Dr. Wallace for the following week. The next morning brought a new escalation. Extended family members began taking sides publicly. Uncle Robert, my mother's brother, posted a lengthy defense of her parenting, citing her sacrifices, without specifying what those might have been. Cousin Brittany shared childhood photos with captions lamenting how money changes people. But then something unexpected happened. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Audrey? This is Judith, your mother's sister." My Aunt Judith had been somewhat estranged from our family for years, appearing only at major holidays and occasionally sending birthday cards. "I've been watching this circus on Facebook," she continued, and I couldn't stay silent any longer. "There's something you need to know about Victor." My heart raced. "I'm listening." "This isn't the first time he's done this," Judith said gravely. "Before your mother, he was engaged to my friend Elaine. She owned a successful boutique. He gradually isolated her from friends, then pressured her to make his name a co-signer on business accounts for tax purposes. Within 6 months, he drained the accounts and disappeared." I sank into a chair, pieces clicking into place. "He's a con artist." "A very good one," Judith confirmed. "I tried to warn your mother when they started dating, but she accused me of jealousy. We haven't spoken since." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I watched him destroy Elaine, and I can't be silent while he tries to do the same to you. And because someone needs to stand up for the truth in this family for once." After thanking Judith, I immediately called Margaret and relayed the information. "This changes things," she said thoughtfully. "With specific allegations of prior fraud, we have more to work with. I'd recommend hiring a private investigator to verify these claims and potentially uncover more." By the end of the week, I'd engaged Dennis Morgan, a former police detective turned PI. Meanwhile, the professional fallout continued. The local business community was buzzing with rumors. Former colleagues called asking if everything was okay. One potential investor pulled out of negotiations, citing concerns about leadership stability. Each night, I'd return home exhausted from maintaining a professional facade while my personal life imploded. Sleep became elusive, replaced by hours of staring at the ceiling, replaying years of interactions with my mother and wondering how I'd missed the signs. The social media attacks continued, but something unexpected began happening in the comments. People who had worked with me professionally started defending my character and business practices. Former clients posted about their positive experiences. Even a few distant relatives questioned the one-sided narrative being presented. The truth was beginning to emerge, but the question remained. How much damage would be done before it fully came to light? 3 weeks into what I'd begun mentally calling the family siege, Dennis Morgan requested a meeting. He arrived at my office carrying a thick manila folder, his expression suggesting he'd found something significant. "I've completed my preliminary investigation into Victor Morales," he began once we were seated in my office, blinds drawn for privacy. "What I found confirms your aunt's suspicions and goes considerably further." He opened the folder and spread several documents across my desk. Criminal records, newspaper clippings, and printouts of court cases created a damning portrait. "Victor has been convicted of fraud twice, both times with suspended sentences," Dennis explained, pointing to the official records. "His modus operandi is consistent. He targets successful single women, particularly those with their own businesses. He establishes trust, integrates himself into their lives, then leverages emotional manipulation to gain financial control." I stared at the evidence, a strange sense of validation washing over me. So, this was never about Connor's future. It was about gaining control of my company's assets. "Almost certainly," Dennis nodded. "But your half-brother and mother may not be willing conspirators. Based on the pattern, Victor likely convinced them they deserved a share of your success while planning to ultimately control everything himself." The revelation was both comforting and disturbing. On one hand, perhaps my mother wasn't deliberately trying to steal from me. On the other, she had been so easily manipulated into turning against her own daughter. "There's more," Dennis continued, pulling out bank statements. "I've documented unusual withdrawals from what appears to be your mother's savings account, nearly $50,000 over the past 6 months, all since Victor entered the picture. He's been stealing from her too, I whispered, the full picture becoming clearer. Classic con artist behavior, Dennis confirmed. They often extract smaller amounts from their primary mark while working toward the bigger score. Armed with this information, I contacted Margaret to develop our next steps. We agreed that confronting my mother with evidence of Victor's past might finally break his hold over her. But first, we needed to address the immediate business threats. The forgery attempt is particularly concerning, Margaret said after reviewing Dennis's findings. The PI had discovered that Victor had attempted to forge my signature on company documents submitted to the state business registry. Fortunately, the discrepancy had been flagged by a clerk who noticed it didn't match previous filings. That's criminal activity, I said, still processing the audacity. Exactly. We have grounds for a restraining order now, not just against Victor, but potentially all three of them given the coordinated nature of the harassment. The restraining order was granted 2 days later, following an incident where Victor appeared at my home late at night, pounding on the door and shouting threats until neighbors called police. The court ordered him to maintain a distance of at least 500 feet from me, my home, and my business premises. Meanwhile, our transparent communication strategy with clients began bearing fruit. Most clients who had expressed concerns returned once they saw our continued solid performance and forthright approach to addressing the rumors. The crisis even led to unexpected growth as our handling of the situation impressed several prospects who valued integrity and resilience. On a personal level, my weekly sessions with Dr. Wallace provided crucial support for processing the complex emotions surrounding my family's betrayal. What you're experiencing is a form of grief, she explained during one particularly difficult session. You're mourning the loss of the family relationship you thought you had, as well as the one you always hoped for. This framework helped me understand the waves of sadness that would hit unexpectedly, even as my resolve to protect myself strengthened. Establishing boundaries doesn't mean you failed at family, Dr. Wallace reassured me. It means you're succeeding at self-respect. 6 weeks into the ordeal, Aunt Judith called again. Your mother reached out to me, she said, her voice cautious. She's asking questions about Victor's past. I think the facade might be cracking. This news prompted me to take a calculated risk. After consulting with Margaret and Dr. Wallace, I decided to arrange a meeting with my mother, not at my home or office, but on neutral ground with Aunt Judith present as a mediator. We met at a private room in a downtown restaurant. My mother looked thinner than I remembered, dark circles under her eyes, suggesting she wasn't sleeping well either. Judith sat between us, her presence a buffer against the emotional intensity. Thank you for coming, I began formally, struggling to keep my professional demeanor in place. My mother nodded, her eyes not quite meeting mine. Judith says you have information about Victor. I placed a folder on the table, copies of the most damning evidence Dennis had uncovered. Before we discuss that, I want to be clear. This meeting isn't about reconciliation. It's about providing you with information that affects your safety and financial security. She flinched at my businesslike tone but reached for the folder. These are criminal records, victim statements, and bank records, I explained as she began examining the documents. Victor has done this before to at least 3 other women. He identifies successful women, isolates them from support systems, then uses emotional manipulation to gain control of their assets. My mother's face paled as she turned pages, seeing the pattern emerge. When she reached the bank statements showing withdrawals from her own accounts, her hands began to tremble. I don't understand, she whispered. These are for my retirement savings. Victor said he was making investments for our future. He's been systematically draining your accounts, I said gently, my anger temporarily set aside in the face of her genuine shock. Just as he planned to do with my company, once he gained control. But Connor, she protested weakly. He said this was for Connor's future. Connor was the perfect pawn, Aunt Judith interjected. Victor used her desire to secure Connor's future as leverage to target Audrey's more valuable assets. My mother closed the folder, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know, Audrey. I thought we were building something for Connor. Victor said you had so much and weren't sharing. Would that justify trying to take my company? I asked, keeping my voice level. Even if Victor's intentions had been pure, which they clearly weren't, what made you think you had any right to what I built? She had no answer, and in her silence, I saw the first glimmer of genuine recognition of how deeply she had wronged me. Our conversation was interrupted by my phone ringing. Lauren. I almost declined the call, but something made me answer. Audrey, you need to come to the office now, Lauren said urgently. Connor is here. He's alone and says it's important. Leaving my mother with Aunt Judith to process the revelations, I drove to the office, unsure what new drama awaited. I found Connor sitting in the reception area, looking younger and more vulnerable than I'd seen him in years. Victor's gone, he blurted out as soon as I approached. He cleared out Mom's accounts yesterday and disappeared. She doesn't know yet. I found the transfer notifications on her email. The final piece of Victor's con was playing out exactly as Dennis had predicted. How much did he take? I asked. Everything, Connor replied, his voice breaking. And I helped him do it. He convinced me I deserved part of your company because Mom had always given you more attention than me. I almost laughed at the irony. Connor genuinely believed I had been the favored child. I was jealous of your success, he continued, looking down at his hands. And Victor knew exactly how to use that. But yesterday, I overheard him on the phone talking about taking the money and disappearing. That's when I realized he'd been using all of us. Connor's confession marked a turning point. The narrative Victor had constructed, of family entitlement and justified demands, was crumbling under the weight of his betrayal. The question now was whether anything could be salvaged from the wreckage of these relationships, and whether I even wanted to try. The news of Victor's final betrayal hit my mother with devastating force. When Connor and I arrived at her house to break the news, we found her already in tears, phone in hand. The bank called, she said hollowly. All the accounts are empty, even my checking account. I felt a complicated mixture of vindication and pity. We need to file a police report immediately, I said, shifting into problem-solving mode. Dennis has compiled evidence of Victor's pattern of fraud that will help your case. My mother looked up, confusion crossing her tear-stained face. You'd help me? After everything? I'm helping because it's the right thing to do, I clarified. And because putting Victor behind bars protects other women from becoming his next victims. The following days were a blur of police statements, bank investigations, and discovering just how thoroughly Victor had integrated himself into my mother's financial life. Beyond emptying her accounts, he had opened credit cards in her name and taken out a second mortgage on her house, leaving her not just penniless, but deeply in debt. Aunt Judith moved in temporarily to provide emotional support, while I handled the practical and legal aspects of the crisis. Connor, seemingly shocked into maturity by the situation, took a job at a local restaurant to help with immediate expenses. Through it all, I maintained emotional distance. I arranged meetings with financial advisors, connected my mother with resources for fraud victims, and ensured she had legal representation, all while keeping our personal interactions minimal and focused on the tasks at hand. 2 weeks after Victor's disappearance, we received news that police had located him in Arizona, attempting the same scheme with a divorced restaurant owner he'd met online. The evidence Dennis had compiled proved crucial in securing his arrest and extradition. With Victor in custody and the immediate crisis stabilized, the time came for the conversation I'd been avoiding. My mother requested a meeting at her house, with Aunt Judith and Connor present. I need to apologize, she began when we were all seated in her living room. Not just for what happened with Victor, but for years before that. I remained silent, neither accepting nor rejecting the opening. When you were growing up, she continued, I was so focused on my own needs, finding security with Raymond, creating a new family, that I neglected you. Then when you became successful on your own, I felt entitled to that success because acknowledging your complete independence meant facing my failure as a mother. Connor shifted uncomfortably beside her. I need to apologize too. I was horrible at your company, and I never should have expected you to hand over something you built. Victor manipulated me, but I was an easy target because I was already jealous and entitled. Their words seemed sincere, but years of emotional manipulation had made me cautious. I appreciate you both acknowledging these things, I said carefully. But trust isn't rebuilt with one conversation. Actions matter more than words at this point. What can we do? My mother asked, a note of desperation in her voice. Give me space, I replied honestly. Respect my boundaries. Work on yourselves. I can't promise reconciliation, but those are the minimum requirements for me to even consider it. The meeting ended with no dramatic resolution, no tearful group hug, just a fragile understanding that the path forward, if there was one, would be long and uncertain. As Victor's case progressed through the legal system, more victims came forward, revealing the extent of his predatory pattern. My mother's testimony would eventually prove crucial in securing a substantial sentence, providing her a measure of closure and purpose amid the wreckage of her finances. Meanwhile, despite the personal turmoil, my business continued to thrive. The transparency with which we'd handled the crisis actually strengthened client relationships and attracted new partnerships. In a surprising development, we won a major contract with a client who cited our demonstrated resilience and integrity as deciding factors. During this period of professional success and personal reconstruction, I received an unexpected call from the editor of a local business journal. We've been following your company's growth with interest, the editor explained. Our annual Women Entrepreneurs issue is coming up, and we'd like to feature your story. Not just the business success, but how you navigated recent challenges while continuing to expand. My initial reaction was reluctance. The last thing I wanted was to publicly air family drama. But after consideration, I recognized an opportunity to control the narrative that had been weaponized against me. The resulting article, titled Building Success on Your Own Terms, focused on entrepreneurial resilience and the importance of boundaries in both business and personal life. Without naming names or detailing the specific family conflicts, it addressed the challenges of maintaining business integrity during personal crises. The piece resonated widely, bringing an influx of messages from other entrepreneurs who had faced similar family expectations and boundary violations. What had begun as a painful personal ordeal had transformed into a platform for discussing issues many faced but few discussed openly. 6 months after the confrontation in my office, the landscape of my life had transformed dramatically. New offices accommodated our expanding team. Victor awaited trial on multiple fraud charges. Connor had enrolled in community college classes, funding his education through his restaurant job rather than family handouts. My relationship with my mother remained complicated. We had occasional, carefully bounded interactions, coffee meetings in public places, brief phone calls limited to specific topics. Trust rebuilt slowly, if at all. But the toxic patterns had been broken, allowing space for something healthier to potentially emerge. One evening, as Lauren and I celebrated the completion of a major project, she raised her glass in a toast. To building something that's truly yours, she said with a knowing smile. I clinked my glass against hers, reflecting on the double meaning of her words. I had built not just a successful business, but a life defined by my own boundaries and values rather than others' expectations. To owning your worth, I replied, and never letting anyone take it from you. The journey had been painful, the losses real. But in protecting what I'd built, I had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed, the courage to stand alone when standing together meant compromising my integrity. Some family ties, I had learned, are worth fighting for. Others need to be severed to allow growth. The wisdom lies in knowing the difference and having the courage to act accordingly. What would you do if your family demanded you give up something you'd built from nothing? Let me know in the comments. This journey taught me that sometimes establishing boundaries isn't just self-protection, it's self-preservation. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect what they've worked for. Thank you for coming along on this difficult but ultimately empowering journey with me, and I wish you the strength to honor your own worth in every relationship.